Howdy folks. Today we are going to be continuing GraphQL and we are going to talk about mutations. Mutations are kind of the second part of the GraphQL operations. And if you think about the REST APIs, right, we have a number of methods. We have our get, our post, our put, our patch, our delete. There's probably one other, but I'm forgetting, but those are the common ones. Well, the get is handled by our query in GraphQL. The post, put, delete, and patch are all under mutation. So it's a little bit less confusing since instead of 5 different operations, you only have to deal with 2. So let's take a look at it from the server side. Okay, first of all, in our typedefs, we are going to have, just like we have our type query, there's another special type, and it is called mutation. Similar to query, where query actually determines all the different types of queries and data that we can fetch, mutation determines all the different kinds of mutations that we can make. This could be deletion, this could be update, this could be creation. So let's make one, create user. Now these always take parameters and they will return something. In this case, we're going to return the user. Our parameters, well, there's a couple things we could actually do. We can put a type. We could put user, data user in here, except we don't usually do an ID. So it's probably safer just to say username string age int. Now, right away, if we go ahead and start up our server here, starting. There we go. And then we get our server to load here. Oops, actually, let's go to the Apollo Studio instead. You can see if I go back from query now into root, I now have mutation, which we didn't have before. We used to have query only, now we have mutation, and you can see my create user mutation. If I go in here, say create user, I can determine, oops, I spelled that wrong, determine the arguments. Now, I probably want these to be required both, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe I want to make username required, but not age. So let's try that. So if I go back here now, let's see. Oh no, it's still just asking. Okay, there we go. Now it put username in there by default. I can also add age if I want. And you can see that adds that as another parameter. And then I can again tell it these fields. So what are these fields? Well, I told the GraphQL system that I was returning a user, which means in the GraphQL way, I get to decide which fields on that user I want to get back. Maybe I only want the ID. Again, if I run this, I get a null because I haven't set up the resolver yet. So let's do that. So if we go into our resolvers, we have our query here, right? And again, just like in the typedefs, we're going to declare mutation, which lets it know that these are the mutations. So I'm going to call create user here, pop it in here, async. So just like any other resolver, our first parameter is going to be a parent. It's going to be the parent parameter. And the thing is, mutations probably do not have parents because what would they be a parent of? They're not fetching data. However, GraphQL, this part of the Apollo system, doesn't care. It's just handling these functions the exact same way. So we have our parent, which we're never going to use, username and age, again, destructuring this similar to what we had before. Now, we're just going to return user.create username and age. This will create the object in Mongo and will actually return the Mongoose object, which matches the definition of a user. So if I go in here, whoops, here we go, and I actually create a user, and I'm going to set this to my user, and I'll put the age at here. And I create, you can see now it gave me that ID back. And indeed, if I come back here, and I go and fetch all my users, you can see that here is the new user. So that works exactly as it's intended to. So that is how you set up mutations. Again, just like the queries, these can have any JavaScript inside them. technically you don't actually have to have the mutation. You could put create user as a query, but that would just be kind of wrong. It would work, but it wouldn't make sense. So that's why they add this mutation specifically. So now let's take a look at how we handle these on the client. So similar to our queries in here, I'm going to make a mutations folder. I'm going to import my GQL from Apollo. And then I'm going to export const create user equals GQL. And then just like we did for our actual query, I'm just going to go here, come in here, set up the mutation, add the age, and I'm just going to grab this whole thing, just like I did with the other one. So there we go. It's just a quick way to get all this data. There's my mutation. Parameters, age, etc. So now, let's go to our app, okay? And we're not really doing anything with this user data right now. We could be, so we could do this. Let's say users.forEach, user, return, oops, this should be map. Return div, that is not a div. Div user.username, user.age. All right, and then let's actually get our front end server set up. Let Webpack do its thing for a little bit. All right, now that Webpack is set up, we can go there and we see there's our users. So now let's add in an interface to create a new user. So first of all, I'm going to take a state. I'm going to put temp name, set temp name equals useState, blank string, and then I'm going to copy one of these for age as well, temp age, and then set temp age. And now I'm going to create a very simple little form here. Input type equals text, value equals temp name, on change equals, and then we'll just say set temp name e.target.value. And then I'm just going to grab the same thing for the temp age, set temp. This is not a very pretty page. It's not meant to be. Just put that in there, and then we'll put a button, create. All right. Then inside that button, on click, data equals username, temp name, age, temp age. So now here we have data. Okay. So how are we gonna handle this mutation though? So what we can do first of all is we should import it. User from utils mutations, which is where we have it defined. Now, Apollo client, in addition to useQuery, also has useMutation. It looks a little different though in how it's used. So similar to useQuery, we're going to have something equals useMutation, and then the actual mutation QL that we want to use. What is this something? Well, it's going to be two things. One, the first thing is going to be a function, because unlike the query, this query, we called that immediately, we don't care. The mutation, on the other hand, we specifically want to call that at a point, right? We don't want to call that immediately every time the component renders. So we have a function. We can name this function whatever you want, totally fine. And that's the first parameter, the first array parameter. So see, similar to useState, we've got this two array elements here. This first one is here, and the second one is a data blob. The only thing we really care about here is if there's an error, this error will get populated if there was a problem sending the mutation. So what we need to do then to call our user is we actually want to call create user with an object, and then we're going to call variables and then give our data. This create user will also return, so I could say data equals probably a weight, I would imagine, and that actually returns the data that you get back, which might be useful. Let's say response data. Oh wait, I think this is a promise. Log response data. Let's just do that. All right. So let's run this and see what happens. Let's see here. All right. So let's do our username, test name, and our age 100. And then if we create, well, did we get any errors? Let's check. We did get some console errors. Received status code 400. Bad request. What didn't like that? Okay. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if we got any server logs for that. No, no server logs. Well, let's see what happened there. We did a mutation. We called create user, ID, username, age. We've got our, where am I? Oh, I need to look in the server. We've got our mutation set up here, like this, right? You know what we should do? We should probably test it in Apollo Sandbox. So let's do that. Let's see, Apollo Sandbox, mutation. Okay, so if oh no, we already tested this. We know this works. All right. So then what the next thing to do is to actually look at our network tab. And then I'm going to create this again, and let's take a look. Because the network tab actually does all the stuff in the payload, right? So you can see here, it's giving you the operation name, the query, and then the variables. And I think the problem is I gave age as a string. And because 400 is a bad request. 400 generally means that you put bad data into the system and doesn't know how to handle it. I think I should have given age as a number. So what do we need to do for that? Well, let's take a look at our app. In this case, we can just say parse int temp age 10. 10 being the base that we want to parse it into. That should convert it into a number. All right, let's try that again. Test name 100. And now we get a 200. And if I reload the page, I don't have any rerunning the query. If I reload the page, you can now see that new user there. So that's an important thing to bear in mind for GraphQL, is that it will not automatically try to turn your inputs into something that they're expected to be. If it wants an integer and you give it a string that could be an integer, it's not okay with that. So what did we go over today? We looked at the mutation type and how to set up a mutation in the typedef. We looked at the resolvers and how to set up a mutation in the resolvers. Then, on the client side, we looked at how to actually create these and put them into our client code as queries. We then looked at how to call useMutation to get the function to actually call this stuff. And you notice we had error here. If I'd been logging error, I would have gotten that error on having the bad data. And then we looked at how to actually call that. I didn't check and see if the response data actually happened. Oh, I reloaded it, that's why. Let's try it. Test user 2, 78. And you can see now the response data actually comes back with that data we expected in case you need to use it immediately. So that's something right there, which is useful to know. Anyway, hopefully this is helpful, and I'll see you all next time.